I have real fear that those shows next year aren't going to be the same. I have real fear that somebody who for 50 years I have had his music and certain interviews, I thought him because he was always in sync with the message that was in his music. I have real fear that something I thought I could always go back to and rely on won't feel the same again.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me today is one of my best online friends. One day we will meet in person, and I think we might break the record on hugs because it will be so good to meet in person. The host of Music Talks, one of my favorite podcasts, and my good friend Terry Smith. How are you doing, Terry?
I'm great, Jesse, and it's lovely to be talking to you again, even on a challenging subject, as you said on Twitter. It will be fun and it will be respectful.
Absolutely. I do want to just tell you I have really loved your latest guests. I think you continue to be a diverse set, different experiences, different ages. One of the things I'm really happy with, and I think you and I have talked about this, is it's very easy for me to get a lot of white guys on Set Listing Bruce. And in 2023 or 2022, I specifically tried to diversify and get people of color, people of, a lot of females. And you have done a great job of kind of keeping your guest diversified.
Yeah, trying to, Jesse, and as we'll probably talk about at the end, also grateful for you continuing to say, hey, I've just had this great guest and I think they'd be fantastic on Music Talk. So one of my interesting, I don't know if you find this, one of my interesting observations, if I look at my data, is my female guests get more downloads than my male guests.
Oh, how interesting. That is great news.
My theory is that women have real friends. whereas guys go, you must listen to this podcast, and we go, yeah, and never do it. So but yeah, it is genuinely interesting that women guests are always good numbers.
Yeah. Terry is taking time out of his Sunday afternoon. I'm getting up a little bit early on a Sunday morning to talk about this ticket situation and the latest feeling of around Bruce Springsteen fandom. And he and I are normally in sync all the time. And Terry sent a tweet going, I'm surprised you and I aren't on the same page. And so we thought about, first off, Terry and I, any excuse to talk to each other, we take. The slimsiest premise. Okay, hey, let's do an episode. Everyone, we're not going to rehash the experiences. We're just going to talk about our each feelings. And so you are my guest, so I'm going to let you go first.
That's great, Jesse. Thank you. And what I thought I would do, I mean, I know you have a lot of regular listeners, but some people may not have heard us talking before. So I thought I'd just kick off with a little bit about me in terms of how long I think I've been in this conversation with Bruce. And then, I tried to buy tickets in Europe, the UK, and the US. For those paying attention, I am drawing a distinction between UK and Europe, not because I was a fan of Brexit, but actually the process was very different in the UK. The dates came out later and the process was different. So I just thought it might be useful, particularly for US listeners, and I know a lot of them have tried to get tickets in Europe, but just to maybe understand, the differences. And I guess what I will say is I recognize this is a very personal, I want to talk. The issue for me, I know your tweet said, why are people worried about Bruce making money? It's not about money. It's not even that much about ticket prices. For me, it's two things. It's the experience I've had in the last couple of months, which has not been positive, and also how I think, and I will use that phrase again because Bruce uses it a lot, how the conversation that he's been having with his audience and with me for 50 years has changed. So
got it.
That's how I'm going to approach it. But let me kick off. So I'm 65. My first album I bought was Wild and the Innocent. So I've been doing this for a while. And whilst I had to wait until 1981 to see Bruce, because obviously he did Hammersmith, he did London in 75, and then that was it for 6 years. I've been lucky enough to see him 48 times over 41 years and actually in 10 different countries. So I think I have a pretty good experience of, different ways of approaching this. The other thing to say, and again, I recognize this then makes it personal, is I and my wife, we are GA, we are pit people.
Right.
So, we want to stand a gig. The last time I can remember seeing Bruce, other than solo stuff we have to sit, where I had a seat was one of the nights on the Rising Tour when I took a friend who needed to sit down. But, standing, and particularly standing in the pit, is a massive part of the live experience for me. Now, I said I'm 65. The good news is I think I'm healthy enough to still do a 3-hour show, but next year will tell.
Yes.
But that's basically what we were looking for. And I think also, before I talk through the experience I had this time around, is just to say what was the experience for me prior to that, given that background. And, it was actually an incredibly straightforward process because you went online, you bought a GA ticket. And you bought it for last tour about $120 when we were living in Seattle. And, if you were in the US, then you turn up between 2 and 5 and you go in the lottery. If you go to Europe, it was, and actually also Australia, I was lucky enough to get to, it was a different experience because then there is someone who starts a pit queue, depending which European country you're in, sometimes 2, if it's Italy, 3 days before the gig.
Yeah.
And you turn up. We would normally turn up sort of 10, 11 in the morning. You get a number, you hang around. There's a roll call every 2 hours, and round about 4:30, 5 o'clock, you'll be let into the stadium. And depending on whether it's a stadium or an arena gig, in an arena, about 450, 500 people get in. And if you've got one of those numbers, then great. If not, I remember it happening to San Siro. We missed out by about 20 people.
Oh.
Well, here's the irony, is that actually that was still one of the great gigs, because, of course, the good thing is then you're first into the main GA.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was upsetting at the time. So a very different process in Europe and in Australasia. And I have to tell you the story because I know Americans have a view about the European system, and some of it is right, which is, here was the silliest and saddest thing I saw, was that when I was in Australia, I was stood near a guy who halfway through night 1 in Sydney left the gig to start the pit queue for night 2.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Now that is stupid.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Terry. I'm going to say
that is missing the point.
That is totally missing the point.
And I would also say we are sad enough to have sort of kept a record. So we were about 65, 70% in terms of getting into the pit.
Okay.
So that was the process. So buying tickets, it was just get GA, it's list price, then you go and queue. Okay.
Right.
So the first thing for me that, and we'll probably come back to it later, that I think was a massive mistake, although it wasn't a surprise to me, was the decision to sell pit tickets. I just think is wrong. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, I actually think the Springsteen pit is a marketing man's dream.
So,
because I've got friends who tell people how good the pit is. They've never been in it.
Right. But tell me again what you mean by this is a mistake to sell the pit ticket.
Well, up until this tour, you couldn't buy, well, actually, there was a way, and I'll come back to that. But you couldn't buy a pit ticket. You just bought GA, and you either in Europe queued, or in the States, you went into a lottery.
Got it. Now I understand. Thank
But
you.
there was no
Okay.
pit ticket.
Okay. Got it.
Just in case people are going, so how did you buy a pit ticket? For the last couple of tours, Steve Van Zandt and the Rock and Roll Foundation, they've done meet and greets,
Right.
where you did the meet and greet and then you got a guaranteed pit ticket. Two things. One, you paid list price for the ticket. The additional money you paid went to Steve's charity.
Right. The that music in schools. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is that those meet and greets were $500.
Yes.
Which in the context of what we've gone through in the last couple of months puts, I think, things into perspective. But basically, so, you look at an arena tour, which is what you're talking about in the States, you're going to let 450 people into the pit.
Yeah.
And you're going to charge, and I'm using European pricing, you're going to charge 50 or 60 bucks more. Now, clearly that's not what happened with dynamic pricing, but you're going to charge marginally more, and you're going to lose all of that culture that has gone around the lottery and the queue.
Right.
And, I have said this to a number of dear friends in Seattle. But, I look at the Seattle tickets and basically you would have to, you're paying $1,250 for a pit ticket. Okay.
Okay.
One of the things I loved about, and I spent 22 years at Microsoft. I have lots of dear friends, but I have a horrible feeling that the pit in Seattle this time will be full of Microsoft, Amazon, and Google folks because they can afford the $1,250. And that's not the pit.
So
the pit is a whole
yeah.
cross section of a Bruce audience. So that was the first thing that upset me, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Then if I talk through the process, and it is fascinating how Europe, UK, and US, the issues were different. So I'll try and keep this short, but
no, you're good.
The issue was just administration and process was poor. I don't know if you realize, but Ticketmaster had to stop 3 sales in Copenhagen, Amsterdam, and Landgraf. Like literally just suspend the sales because they couldn't cope and systems were crashing and people's prices were all over the place. And so they had to stop 3. Then you'd be in a sale and a new date would be announced while the sale was going on. So that whole thing was a mess. I then have to tell you about what I call the French fiasco. And for anyone listening who's with a French background, I know I'm British and therefore I'll go into caricature.
Right.
But I refer to this as the French fiasco because Bruce's management, for some reason, decided it was a good thing to let the French promoter, who only promotes events in France, do his own online web sale. So you had to register for his site. That's fine. I registered. I double, triple checked. I then signed on. I got put into a queue. And the good news is that I was 1,147 in the queue. The bad news is that they were selling about 10 to 12 tickets a minute.
Wow.
Now, to put it into perspective, Dublin, I was 5,000 in the queue and I got my ticket in 5 minutes. But so after almost 3 hours, I finally got the tickets through. I bought the tickets or secured the tickets I wanted. I then got to check out to be told your account isn't valid. And I was not alone in that. So a lot of people then said,
my goodness.
Let's forget about France. And the other implication of the fact that there were pit tickets being sold was the whole thing was really quite confusing. So I'll give you an example. In Dublin, it still looks like, actually, it's just, it looks like Dublin is going to do the old system of GA and then you queue. In Ferrara in Italy, there was a pit A, a pit B, a pit C, a pit D. So you didn't know what you were buying. And then whilst Europe didn't have dynamic pricing, it did have platinum tickets. And I have to say, I fell foul of that. And I use that in that I did look and think, I've always wanted to go to Gothenburg and Ullevi. This is the stadium that in the Born in the USA tour almost collapsed because it was bouncing so much.
Yeah.
Bruce actually caused $3 million of damage to the stadium.
Wow.
So I went on to try and get tickets. And then suddenly, bing, would you like a platinum ticket? Now, at the time, I thought this was extortionate pricing. Given what's happened in the US, it actually now looks very reasonable. But it was $340 for a pit ticket, as opposed to the $100 it should have been. Interestingly, and we'll come back to this later, I've subsequently sold those tickets because I'm not going. And various reasons for that, which we'll talk about later. So Europe was all about, it was just a painful experience. Okay. That said, I got tickets for Dublin. I got tickets for Rome, not Pitt, but I also got tickets for Ferrara, which I've also now sold.
Okay.
So there was then the UK. Okay. Dates came out later. For various reasons, which is fine. The issue in the UK was there was pre-sales.
Yeah.
So if I give you I said I'd seen him in 10 countries. I now live in Scotland. I have a strong Scottish heritage. I'd actually never seen Bruce in Scotland.
Yeah.
So Edinburgh is like, okay, we're getting pit tickets for Edinburgh, whatever it takes. Now, I told you about the queuing in Europe, and people would say to me, so you turn up at 10 or 11 in the morning and you queue all day and you do these roll calls. Isn't that just stupid? Well, I'll tell you what's stupid is getting up on a Monday morning with 4 PCs and my wife and sitting on a pre-sale, doing the same on Tuesday, different pre-sales, different organizations, doing it on a Wednesday, different pre-sale, not getting tickets. And then on the Thursday, we finally got a pit ticket because we paid $550 each for a platinum ticket at our hometown gig. Didn't feel great. And then we're also going to go to Villa Park, and we went on there. And I said I hadn't sat at a Bruce gig for 20 odd years, but at Villa Park we took seats because they were decent seats, and they were all, there was nothing on the pitch available. So, but the thing is, you literally had the Badlands pre-sale, you had the Ticketmaster pre-sale, you had the AXS pre-sale, you had the Virgin pre-sale, you had the O2 pre-sale, and then there's about 4 or 5 others. And it's like, why can't we just sell tickets?
Yes. Yeah.
And then, of course, I then started trying to buy tickets in the States, and I'd registered for Seattle, but then decided I wasn't going to do that. And the trip we did want to make, we have dear friends in New York. We've always wanted to do Madison Square Gardens. We actually had tickets for Madison Square Gardens in 2017 when 28 inches of snow arrived.
Right, the snowstorm. Yeah.
Snowstorm. So we'd flown from Seattle for the gig, and then it was cancelled, and we couldn't fly back from Seattle for the rearranged gig. So we wanted to do Madison Square Garden. So I got verified fan for Seattle and for New York. Then decided we weren't going to do Seattle, but offered it to friends for 2 reasons. One, if I can help people get tickets, I will. 2 was I want to practice what this system is in the States. And I had friends who said, their budget was $500 plus fees. I went onto the Seattle pre-sale, and honestly, Jesse, I don't know what your experience was like, and I am not exaggerating here at all, because the last thing I want to do is exaggerate what I think is a challenging situation. I must have tried 12 times to buy tickets, and each time what would happen is I'd get the ticket, I'd go into the process, and then it would say, sorry, somebody else has got these tickets. And literally after a dozen times, I gave up. I then went back on about 6 hours later. I just thought, just try. And I went back on, and there were 2 tickets for $540. I had a hard copy printout of the seating map, because he's changed it since I was in Seattle. And I literally saw the tickets for $540, double checked on the physical seat map, went back, and they were $750.
Gosh.
And I did check today, if you want to buy a ticket in Seattle, and these are not resale tickets, this is Ticketmaster Platinum, you can do it for $2,100 plus fees. And if you want to buy Madison Square Gardens, you can do it for $2,500 plus fees. Again, not resale tickets. Ticketmaster platinum tickets.
Yeah.
And I think what is interesting, I've got about a dozen friends who wanted to go to see Bruce in Seattle, and actually only one guy, Paul Simpson, he bought 4 tickets in the nosebleeds for $360 plus fees. Everybody else just said not doing it.
Yeah.
So that was my experience, and I guess, and I will shut it in amongst everything else, and we'll dig into it. Here's my first issue, which is, given what everybody's gone through in the last few years, and before we pressed record, you were talking about, some of the challenges you're facing.
Yeah.
Boy, do we need stuff to look forward to. And, there's lots of data that shows that actually people get more enjoyment out of the anticipation of going on holiday than actually going on holiday.
Yeah.
This is a tour we've got 6 to 12 months to look forward to. All of that excitement and anticipation is gone for me, and here we are, and I'm not complaining in the sense of, here we are, you and I talking about ticketing and the experience and how awful it is, not going, so what do you think he's going to start with? And what about it? And I'll start with that as my biggest issue. And this is not about money or Bruce making, you look at Broadway, the tickets were expensive.
Yeah.
But the first thing is, at least there was a list price.
Yeah.
I'll shut up, Jesse, because I'm ranting now.
No, you're not ranting at all. And I think where I think people misunderstand me is, I agree with everything you say. I agree. All of it sucks. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I don't understand being mad at Bruce. I understand being frustrated. I understand being unhappy with the system, but I am serious. I've seen people. I am not going to renew my vanity plate that I have Bruce because of this situation. A guy tweeted me today, I still have Sirius XM, but I don't listen to E Street Radio anymore. I will never go see another Bruce show. He is dead to me. The anger toward Bruce is what confuses me.
All right. Well, let me, and again, I'm talking about me. I'm not trying to talk on
sure.
behalf
No,
of
I
anybody
absolutely.
Do I have that anger? Probably not. I'll tell you what I do have. I have real fear that those shows next year aren't going to be the same. I have real fear that somebody who for 50 years I have had his music, and certainly until recently, I thought him, because he was always in sync with the message that was in his music.
Right.
Okay. I have real fear that something I thought I could always go back to and rely on won't feel the same again. Literally the only, and this is not, I'm banning Bruce. This is, I'm worried about putting stuff on and going, that doesn't sound good. I am going to struggle to listen to We Take Care of Our Own, because he hasn't, and he has to bear some responsibility for that, in my view, because this is a man who I think with great credibility has said, I'm in a lifelong conversation with my audience.
Right.
There is no conversation going on, Jesse. So if I had a friend who I'd been in a lifelong conversation with, who then did things I didn't understand and then stopped talking to me, I'd be confused and worried.
So what do you think Bruce and his camp should have done?
Well, it's a great question, but I think there's two parts to that question. One, what should they have done?
Yeah.
Two, what can they do?
Right.
Okay. So I think the first mistake they made, dynamic pricing is evil. And I say that in a very considered way. And let me tell you why. Remember, I worked in the IT industry for 40 years. I know a bit about user interfaces. I also know how Ticketmaster has sold tickets since the day they started. What you see now is not the way they've sold tickets. Mm-hmm. So, a fundamental thing is click on that seat. You now have 8 minutes to buy it, or whatever the time is.
Yeah.
Gone. All right. flashing screens, a bit like we call them one-armed bandits over here, slot machines, in a casino.
Yeah.
All right. Right. That is not good. You then if you get past this, somebody else has got this, tickets going into a basket that then increase in price by the time you get to checkout. That is manipulative. That is exploitative. How many people have now sat with tickets that go, I didn't mean to spend $450.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to spend £280 in Gothenburg. That's why I've sold them. So, the decision to do dynamic pricing on an arena tour when you haven't toured for 6 years.
Yeah.
The algorithm is going to go mad.
Yeah.
Anyone with a semblance of knowledge would get that. They could have turned around and said, cap it. No ticket goes beyond this.
Yeah.
They could have turned around and said, do you know what? We are going to sell pit tickets, but 20% of them we're going to sell at really high prices, and the money's all going to go to whoever the fundraiser is that night that you always get at a Bruce show.
Yeah.
So, but I actually think in the US, if they'd have simply gone front, middle, back, there's 3 prices, this is it, you wouldn't have this furor.
The other thing that I would change, and once again, you and I have talked about, no one ever asks us. One of the things that makes me frustrated and angry at Ticketmaster is when I pull up my Uber app to get a ride, it tells me surge pricing is in effect. You are paying X times the base price, 3 times, 5 times, whatever it is. And it tells me that, right? I have an option to, well, this normally would cost $8 for this trip. It's going to cost 38. Do I want to go now or not? I could not tell you. I've got tickets for 3 shows. I am going to Tulsa, I am going to Dallas, and I'm going to Houston. Houston's a whole different story that I will be glad to share with you in a minute. But both of those, I went in. I don't care where I sit. I found 3 seats that were roughly about $180 each in the upper tier. That's less than I want to pay. Hit go. Now, I don't know what the face value of that ticket was. Was it 105? I don't know. I know that I got 3 tickets for Tulsa that were roughly about 180, 190. And then the reason I asked that, one of them was 170, one of them was 180, and I can never remember which one's which, right? And so I got them for Dallas. I knew I wanted to be in the building. I knew what I wanted to pay. And so I ended up getting out okay. But I totally agree with you. I don't know how much over face value I paid.
Correct.
And, and I think that's wrong. I totally agree that's wrong.
Well, but particularly as, we're living in hard times, and how are people supposed to budget when you're saying, I'm not going to tell you what the list price is? I mean, my friend in New York, Larry, who always has, he sent me a mail saying, hey, is this a ticket sale or is it an auction?
Yeah.
And the answer is it's an auction.
It is.
And by the way, I think your Uber example is great, but I think there's also a couple of differences there. And my understanding is on Uber, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you click on surge pricing, that's what you get.
Yes.
Right. The second thing, as you say, is you can decide, I'm going to have another drink and wait 30 minutes. It's a bit different, and the whole analogy that says it's airline pricing, we've been used to the principle of supply and demand forever.
Yeah.
Okay. We get that. But that is different to, you have a capacity of 20,000, and that's assuming Ticketmaster have actually released all the tickets, because the fact that platinum tickets keep turning up suggests they haven't. But let's assume all the tickets are on sale And in a Madison Square Garden situation, you've got 20,000 tickets and you've got 250,000 people coming in at the same time trying to buy them. And then we're going to apply supply and demand and surge pricing. What is going to happen?
Yeah.
You know, there aren't that many people trying to get that Uber cab.
No, well,
there's more, but there's not that many, you know.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you know, I told the story, but I don't use Uber very often, and so I was actually at there was a Bruce tie. I went to see Bruce open the tour in Pittsburgh. I had flown in, gotten a little hotel room, called Uber, you know, used the app, took me down to the arena, and God, this was so easy. And then after the show, you know, I try and there's no rides available. And they were, you know, 10 times because everyone's wanting to leave at the same time. And that was my first experience of like, oh, wow, I don't like this. I don't understand. I've talked about this before. There is, and I don't know if they're showing it over there, but in US, there's, you know, don't become your parents, right? Progressive insurance. And there is the scene where the guy walks in and he goes in front of the concession stand. He goes, and drinks and snacks are going to be more expensive than they should be. Let's just move on. I get yes, tickets are more expensive than we wish they were. Let's move on. However, I don't think it's fair or right that when I walk into there, because it happened to me a couple times too, I've put them in my cart and they said, wait a minute. No, they aren't available anymore. Like, okay, then why did you let 2 or 3 people select them?
Correct.
Right.
And that's a system change. That's not an accident. That is deliberate.
Anyway, continue on. What else you were
well,
on a roll.
You know, I think just to dig in, you know, your question of what can Bruce do. Bruce got credit in 1984-85 when the 2 biggest acts in the world were Bruce Springsteen and Michael Jackson, and Bruce was touring at half the price of Michael Jackson.
Right.
Okay. You watch Springsteen and people will tell stories, heart-wrenching, moving stories about Bruce staff coming up and giving them front row tickets when they were up in the gods.
Yeah.
Right. So quite rightly, in my view, he has had credit throughout his career for caring about his audience, you know, particularly, I have to say, in Europe, because the pit thing, you know, you watch gigs, he'll pick people out of you were in Munich the other night, and you know, and the fact that has now changed, I for one can't subscribe to. Well, Bruce doesn't know anything about it. You know, if he's got credit for 50 years for all the good things, when it goes bad, you can't then go out. Now, do I think it says he's more distant? Can I imagine? You know, I think the Landau statement that says, "Hey, our peers are all doing this." Well, I've seen the Stones and stuff, and I wasn't. You know, I've bought a lot of tickets. One of the reasons I get Verified Fan, because of course it's not Verified Fan, it's Verified Ticketmaster Customer.
Thank you. That is another thing. If I had the magic power, I would change that, because
absolutely.
Everyone they're so furious, and I'm like, no, this doesn't mean that you're a true fan. It means verified person, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So you know, I have to believe that he is certainly aware of the situation. I think I can imagine you know, ironically, I watched the Elvis movie last night. Now, I'm not for a second suggesting John Landau has suddenly turned into Colonel Tom Parker, okay? But it was. I will
tell you, Mike Appel made that argument in his book.
Well, that's interesting. There is interesting.
Yes,
because
in his book, he specifically said John Landau was similar to Colonel Parker, which I thought was interesting at the time.
Okay, well, and I haven't read Mike's book, so I should do that.
Yeah.
But, I can imagine that the conversation that says, hey, Taylor's been doing this, the Stones do it, but first of all, it's been incredibly mismanaged. And there's a difference between doing dynamic pricing on a 20,000 arena and a 90,000 stadium gig in Dublin,
Yeah.
I have to believe that they've mismanaged. I mean, Landau's statement was petrol on a fire.
Yeah.
I mean, I am pretty sure that in a few years' time in media studies, how not to do PR, it will be a case study on how not to do it. And therefore, they're now in the say nothing. Here's the only thought I've had, Jesse, and I will presage this with, I can't actually remember what the example was a couple of years ago, but and it was a positive thing. But I said to Laura, do you know what Bruce and John Landau should have done? And she looked at me and she said, my, Terry, she said, just think how successful Bruce would have been if he'd have had you as his manager instead of that idiot Landau.
Yes.
So I'm not claiming superpowers, but if I was them, because it's too late to go back.
Right.
I don't think they can unravel this. There was the example of Crowded House who, said, we didn't know this was going on, give people their money back. But I just think it's too late and it's too far and it's too complicated.
Right.
I don't think he can go, I'm going to give $1 million from each gig to charity, because frankly, my reaction will be, so you take my money and then you decide what you want to give it to.
Right.
What I think he could do, because the main issue is in the US, or what's happening in the US, is for the stadium tours, is to do what I suggested, that says there's 3 prices, there's front, middle, and back, and it's like 125, 175 bucks, and that's it.
Yeah.
And make some big gesture on the stadium tour.
Now, the counter argument is then the scalpers make all the money and Bruce doesn't.
Well, okay. And that's a valid argument, but here's the interesting thing for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this when this all started, so it just shows that every bad situation is a learning experience. Go online and try and find a scalp ticket for Dublin.
Yeah.
There aren't any.
Now,
I haven't got to the bottom of this, but it seems that the Irish government have outlawed secondary market. What I can tell you, because I bought tickets for Ferrara, is in Italy, if you go on to what was it, the Italia, but the ticket agency is an Italian ticket agency, you can resell your ticket, but only at list price. And if you then post it on Viagogo, it comes up with a message that says your post will not be visible in Italy.
Wow. So
you can legislate on the secondary market, because here's the other thing that we haven't talked about in terms of Ticketmaster and what's going on. And the thing, Landau's statement that said the average ticket has been sold at $262. Yeah. Here's the question. Who to? Because if you think about it, on Ticketmaster, you go on, you buy your ticket, and then you can instantly resell.
Yeah.
Okay. What do we know that ticket touts are good at? Getting tickets before anybody else.
Right.
So I am floating this. If anybody's listening going, you haven't got data on that to support this. No, I haven't. This is just conjecture on my part, but I think there might be an element of truth. How many of those tickets sold at $262 were sold to touts who immediately resell them at $750 to $1,000?
Yeah.
Therefore, the price that the actual fan is receiving is a lot higher. In terms of your point of, if you went out with 7,500, the touts. Yeah, it would. I personally think it needs a gesture at the moment. And that's the only gesture I can think of.
Yeah, I think at this point, and I've said this multiple times, the only thing that would have made everyone happy is if everyone got in the shows they want, in the section they want, at the price they wanted to pay. That is the only dream scenario. I think a lot of people have very unrealistic expectations. I think that there are people who at times have forgotten logic, and Bruce just got $500 million. He should be doing this show for free. they have forgotten the little man. I have said several times that you can sing about wanting social justice and wanting to make sure everyone has the right to vote and marry and to have a decent wage, and still be a capitalist and your, pricing on your shows. This is,
There is a difference between, there's a difference between capitalism and greed, Jesse.
yeah.
And
And
this is greed.
see, I don't, I don't, I guess I find the greed, the Ticketmaster, and I absolutely agree that Bruce is probably, this is nothing happens that he isn't aware. But I just don't think they care. I think they're
You don't think who
decided.
cares?
I don't think that. I think they are trying to do what they think is best in today's marketplace to um to get them a fair value on the show and their money, and at the same time get out and tour. And then all this other stuff comes through, and it just makes a lot of people unhappy. And
Yeah,
I
but
understand.
I
Go
mean,
ahead.
here's my pushback, and I
Yeah,
remember this as a work analogy. We were going through a reorganization, and it had been really difficult.
yeah,
And somebody said, "Do you know how it feels to people? It feels like we took all of the personnel files and we threw them from the bottom of the stairs to the top, and wherever they landed, that's what happened to people."
yeah,
And somebody in the room, I always this stuck with me, that said, "Nah, that can't be true." And they said, "What do you mean?" He said, "If we'd have done that, 50% of the people would have been happy. The problem we've got is 80% of the people are pissed off." And so I hear you on unreasonable expectations, but I don't think that's what we're dealing with here. I think this is complete two things for me. It's completely misreading the mood of the times, which is something that Bruce has always been great at.
yeah,
And it's certainly for me, a man who said, "I'm having a lifelong conversation with his audience," has just changed the conversation fundamentally.
yeah,
I'm going to struggle. I said about we take care of our own. There's winners and losers. Don't get caught on the wrong side of that line. Well, a lot of people think they got caught on the wrong side of the line because the deck was stacked in this sale.
hmm
You don't need a ticket. Just get on board. That one's going to stick.
wow,
And then you look at sing it hard, sing it well, send the robber barons straight to hell. The greedy thieves who came around. This is greed. And I don't for a second believe that if a ticket is sold on Ticketmaster for $2,000, Bruce gets the same return as he does if it's sold for 200. Because if he does, Landau wants sacking.
yeah. No, I mean, I absolutely do think he gets more money, and
And if money's the issue, then simply you said, what should they have done? Don't do arena tours. Just do stadiums, because guess what? You make 4 times the amount of money because there's 4 times the amount of people.
yeah,
If it was simply this is the last tour and we're all going to cash in, just do stadiums.
hmm
But
if we say that this is a last grab for cash to help, is this setting up the retirement fund for the members of the E Street Band? Then of course you're going to try to do this as much as you can, wherever you can.
And that's fine, but at least be transparent. That's what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. And
because the problem is you're then going to come out and portray an image and sing songs with a message that are contrary to what you've done.
So I feel a little bit like our mutual guest, Shun Li, right?
Yes.
Where she talked about she's up screaming and clapping till Born in the USA comes in, and then she sits for that song. So I wonder if that's what will happen, is that there will be certain people like during that song, oh, Wrecking Ball, yeah, kind of sit, do that one.
Yeah, and that just for me, now I'm hoping, by the way, Jesse,
Yeah.
everything I'm saying is complete nonsense, and it doesn't feel like that next year.
Yeah,
But
I hope so too.
that would significantly
Yeah.
reduce the experience for me. And I mentioned, I did actually get offered by my friend who got I've got 2 spare tickets for Seattle. Are you not coming? I'd have got on a plane in 2016 and done that. I know it was but I've never sold tickets to a Springsteen gig before. I've sold Gothenburg and I've sold Ferrara because we're not going. The 4 we're going to, we're treating as holidays that, by the way, at some point we go to see a gig or something. That's not the experience I've had for 40 years. And that's been caused by, and by the way, and I don't mean this arrogantly, I can afford to pay the money.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't. So this isn't, I'm not paying that for anyone.
Yeah.
It's simply a case of this whole process is not transparent. I'll go back to Broadway. Those ticket prices were high. I had no issue at all because one, they were high, but it was a unique experience. It's a small theater. They had tickets coming on each day. There were donations, and he did a Netflix special. Now, was the Netflix special the same as being in the room? No, but it was pretty bloody close.
Yeah, it was.
And it meant that everybody could get to see what he was doing. So I have no issue. You said, what should they have done? However much money has come in, I think if they'd have turned around and said, we're selling floor tickets for $400, I'd have preferred that to the process we'd have had.
Yeah.
Because then at least you knew what you were dealing with.
Well, Terry, you have not changed my mind about being angry at Bruce.
Well, I'm not angry at Bruce. I'm disappointed and hurt.
Okay. See,
I'm disappointed and hurt.
And then there are a lot of people who are angry, but you have made me understand why you are disappointed and hurt.
Yeah, and that's
which I was hoping on. I will take just a little bit of time. I think it's a little callous that people are upset that I'm not mad.
I agree.
There have been a few people on social media that have just said, just really, I don't understand why you're not incensed. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm not either, but I'm not. I get it. I understand all of that, but when I start weighing the pros and cons, the pros outweigh the cons to me only, right? And so I don't hold back anyone's chance for anger. I do think it's a little bit like when Jerry Jones bought the Cowboys and fired Tom Landry way back in 1989. I will never watch the Cowboys again. The Cowboys today are the most valuable franchise in the world, right? It is, baseball had a strike. I will never watch baseball again. People go back. I think there is a little bit of emotional, and I think you're going, I'm going. I do think it is very sad that this isn't a episode where, okay, I'm going to give what I think are going to be the top first 5 songs. You give what your first songs. I'm going to give you my 5. I think this is going to be his encore. You give me your encore because of this other noise that's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, just to go back on you and I disagreeing. I mean, the reason I said that was when you and I understand why you posted it, saying, why are people annoyed at Bruce making money? And I'm like, that's not my issue at all. I mean, my favorite moment, and I think I said it in the response, and somebody, the man wrote Rich Man in a Poor Man's Shirt 30 years ago. My favorite moment on Hyde Park DVD, not my favorite moment, but Hyde Park DVD. And, I treasure that because I was lucky enough to be there. I was with my brother. But there's the brilliant moment where he gets to the top of the stairs and he falls over. And we're watching it for like the 6th time. And Laura goes, nice Gucci working men's boots he's wearing. And we've all known that for years. It's like the man's worth squilled and good bloody luck to him. It's not about the money. It is about that conversation. It is about the experience. And, if I look at your story or your position, and I do not mean this despite, you said, I just want to be in the building. Right. And your ticket buying experience sounds like it was a lot better than a lot of people, certainly everybody else I know. And I don't mean that as in I don't believe you.
No,
I'm really glad that you managed to get tickets at less than the average price. Fantastic. But that's not been the experience of a lot of people.
Yeah. And I do think, and I do wonder, and we don't know, you don't know, is mine the minority? Because it sounds like it is, right? Based on everything we've gotten, or is it the middle range? We just don't know. Terry, as always, I love visiting with you. I could talk to you for another 2 hours. I'm only sad you're not coming to Dallas to see a show.
Me too.
Yeah, I just appreciate you so much. If someone wants to reach you, tell them how, and also give a quick plug to Music Talks.
Okay, so podcast is Music Talks. Guests choose a song from each decade they've lived in and tell me why those songs are important. You can get me at musictalks@outlook.com or on Twitter, just at Music Talks Pod. My current guest is a Randy Brown, who was on Set Listing Bruce. And I think it's the first time it's happened. My next guest is Jeff Smith, who's also been on Set Listing Bruce and is a British MP. So I love the fact that I have to get a British MP referred from my mate in Texas to get onto my podcast.
It truly was. One of the highlights of that was having that someone who is a member of British Parliament join me on the show, and I'm so glad he's going to join you. Terry, my brother, thank you. Take care. Sooner or later, we're going to meet in person and we're going to hug.
And you never know. I may still get on a plane to Dallas.
Sounds good.
We'll see how it goes. You take care. Thank you, folks.
Goodbye. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Merry Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now who does, you can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.